Everybody's heard this sound before. It's a smoke alarm, giving you the early warning needed to escape a fire in your house. Now, I need some volunteers so we can all learn what to do. How about Brandon and Megan? Roll out of bed and stay low to the floor. Now, crawl to the door and remember, keep your head down. The air is cleaner near the ground. So before you open that door, feel it with the back of your hand. If it's cool, open it a crack and check for smoke. If it's okay, stay low and go. But if the door feels hot, don't open it. Escape through a different exit, like a window. Now that you know more about fire safety, talk to your parents about practicing a home fire escape plan with the whole family.
Ron Majors and Carol Marine, weekdays on Channel 5 News at 5.
From Washington, D.C., NBC News presents Drug Wars Tonight. Here is Tom Brokaw.
Good evening. The Camarena case was the most notorious murder of a DEA agent in American history. 16 people have been indicted so far, the most recent by a federal grand jury in Los Angeles just last month. Now, the miniseries takes this case only so far, but it goes well beyond that. So do the drug wars, of course. So for the next 3 nights, following the miniseries, we'll be bringing you up to date on the case of Camarena and the drug wars around the world. We're broadcasting tonight from a DEA laboratory in Washington, D.C. This is one of 8 testing facilities nationwide. It is here that they determine whether or not the substance that has been confiscated is illegal. And of course, the evidence that is developed here is a key to getting a conviction. Relations between the United States and Mexico over drugs have been strained since the days of the Nixon administration. And the Camarena murder was a flashpoint. NBC's investigative reporter Brian Ross covered that case for us and the drug wars as well. Brian, this was not just the murder of another DEA agent.
That's right, Tom. Camarena was murdered because he was not only investigating drug trafficking, but also drug corruption and how high it went in the Mexican police, military, and government. American authorities say, just like Panama, drug corruption in Mexico remains deep and pervasive. And in almost every part of that country, there is a local Noriega, a comandante, a general, a governor, getting rich dealing with Colombian drug bosses who move their cocaine through Mexico into the United States.
American drug agents have not forgotten these scenes. Mexican federal police, in the first days after Camarena's disappearance, taking what amounted to a week-long siesta, while some of their comandantes, it later turned out, were helping Camarena's killers escape. In almost every major investigation in this country of big cocaine shipments coming through Mexico, American authorities have found top Mexican officials in the middle of it. In this case, several powerful Mexicans were caught, but the Mexican general who was indicted for making this highway available as a cocaine landing strip was never turned over by the Mexican government. When he took office 2 years ago, the president of Mexico, Carlos Salinas, promised a crackdown on official drug corruption. And police in Mexico have seized record amounts of cocaine, staging elaborate ceremonies to burn the drugs. In Tijuana, there are now drug roadblocks around the city, drug detecting dogs at the international airport. And in the last several months, there have been shootouts with suspected Colombian cocaine traffickers who have set up virtual drug bases not far from the American border. But American law enforcement authorities say for all the promises of the new Mexican president, Mexico still will not allow American search planes to pursue drug smugglers over the border into Mexico.
Basically, all we can do is watch him thumb his nose at us as he crosses the border.
By all accounts, the same cocaine air and land smuggling routes that DEA agent Camarena was trying to shut down are still in full operation, still protected by some of the same corrupt officials Camarena was going after.
American drug agents have not finished their investigation of the Camarena murder. NBC News has learned that a number of Mexican federal judicial police are expected to be indicted later this year by a federal grand jury in Los Angeles. Tom?
Thanks, Brian. Kiki Camarena was in Guadalajara for almost 5 years, longer than anyone else in the consulate. Too long, according to one U.S. official at the time. But Camarena was a gung-ho guy, and he stayed on voluntarily. Jack Lawn was then the deputy DEA administrator, and he says the agent was murdered because he was doing his job, perhaps doing it too well. Lawn becomes a central figure in the next 2 episodes of the series. Here's Jack Lawn now in the next episode of The Drug Wars.
This is one of the saddest days for this agency I can ever recall. A friend, a comrade, a brother has been lost, betrayed by other lawmen whom he trusted. We're not going to forget that. However long it takes, it is going to be a priority to bring his killers and their co-conspirators to justice.
With us tonight, the real Jack Lawn, who took charge at DEA less than 6 months after the Camarena kidnap murder. During his career, Mr. Lawn spent a lot of years with the FBI, and one question that he's asked more than any other, are you in fact winning this battle, this war on drugs?
I believe we are. I believe we are winning attitudes, not only nationally, but internationally. And I think that's the key to our ultimate success.
Let me ask you about the situation in Mexico. The government of President Salinas is making a lot of progress in the judgment of a lot of people, but there are federal prosecutors who say privately that he's not going far enough, that you still cannot crack, for example, the Mexican military. Is that a fair assessment?
I don't believe it is. I believe that the administration of President Salinas has been in power a very short time. They have enhanced penalties for drug trafficking. They have done a considerable amount of work to deal with the corruption in Mexico. They work very closely with our government and other governments. And very recently, they were acknowledged for their work in the international drug community by being named the president of IDEC, the International Drug Enforcement Conference. I believe that the Mexican government has taken a bold step forward.
Would it be possible for someone in Mexico now to develop those kinds of private marijuana plantations that were so important in the Camarena case?
My sense is that it would not. In the case of Buffalo and Chihuahua, those plantations were developed with the acquiescence of the military, with the acquiescence of senior officials in the Mexican government. I don't believe that would happen today.
Mr. Lawn, if they're doing such a good job, why is the amount of drug coming across from Mexico increasing? It used to be that we got about 30% of the cocaine in this country through Mexico. Now it's up to what, roughly half?
I would say about 35 or 40%. At the same time, we must acknowledge that the seizures of cocaine, the seizures of heroin, the seizures of marijuana have all increased substantially. What has happened is that with the international community doing a better job against other trafficking routes, the Caribbean in particular, the Colombian cartels are more and more using the landmass to take this cocaine through Mexico into the United States.
I know this is a sensitive issue for you, understandably, but the Mexicans will say, hey, look, there are 4 cases involving 7 DEA agents who have been accused of accepting bribes. Corruption is everywhere when there's this kind of money involved. Is that a fair charge on their part?
I think it's a fair charge for anyone to recognize in the international community that there will be corruption. In the case of the corruption in the Drug Enforcement Administration, unfortunately, there was a minimal amount of corruption which we determined, which we weeded out ourselves. I think that's the important difference between what we have done and what was not done in the case of Kiki Camarena.
Mr. Lawn, we'll ask you to stay right there because I know that you'll be eager to hear the views of our next guest, and that is Charles Rangel. He is someone who has been a vocal critic of the DEA on Capitol Hill, a New York congressman. He's in Hong Kong tonight as part of a congressional study group investigating a big upsurge in U.S. Southeast Asia heroin traffic. Congressman Rangel is chairman of the Narcotics Abuse and Substance Control Committee. Mr. Rangel argues that DEA's involvement with General Noriega, whatever that involvement, may have suited drug policy, but it undermined U.S. foreign policy. Mr. Rangel, you've just returned from Panama, I am told. So let me ask you about the differences between Panama and Mexico. Here we had a DEA agent, Kiki Camarena, killed. a lot of evidence that the corruption went all the way to the top of the Mexican government. Do you think that the United States should have launched some kind of a military operation in Mexico at that time?
No, I don't think they should have. I don't think we have any legal support for the invasion of Panama. But it's an interesting question because, first of all, if it wasn't for the outcry of Jack Lawn, we never would have had the administration's support in the investigation of the murderers of Camarena. But it's interesting. We introduced 24,000 troops into Panama, and Jack Lawn is commissioned as the lead law enforcement agency for drug control, and he has less than 3,000 agents, men and women, in the United States and in 44 countries. The problem we have in losing this so-called war is that we don't have a foreign policy commitment. And Jack Lawn is forced to say that every administration that his agents are allowed to work in are cooperating. There hasn't been a Mexican administration that hasn't allegedly cooperated. And I don't want to take anything away from President Salinas, because I do believe that there has been some positive movement. But when you talk about Mexico, you never hear the Secretary of State talk about drugs. You hear them talk about restructuring the debt. You hear them talk about the immigration problem, the trade problems. But Jack Lawn cannot be asked to fight this with less than 3,000 men, and that's our problem.
Charles Rangel is carrying the flag for the DEA here tonight. Does he have a fair point? Would you like to hear the administration foreign policy leaders, the Secretary of State, the National Security Advisor, the President himself, speak out more strongly, more directly about places like Mexico?
I believe that our President has done that. I believe our Secretary of State has done that. Where we ran into difficulty in the Camarena case is that there were very few lone voices speaking out. Ambassador Gavin in Mexico, our speaking out here in Washington, D.C., but we had too few voices and too few listeners to our cry.
Congressman Rangel, let me ask you, do you think as so-called recreational or casual users of drugs, whoever they happen to be, as they watch this miniseries and think again about the kinds of risks that DEA agents take, not just in this country, but around the world, that it will have any impact on use in this country?
It depends on which group you're talking about. Those that have jobs, those that are working, those that have hope for the future, of course, this should have some impact, that they realize that it's no such thing as casual use, that as the demand increases, they're jeopardizing the lives of our law enforcement agents in the United States and around the world. But when you have groups of people that have no jobs, no homes, and no hope for the future, then, of course, this does not have the same priority of concern. To fight the war, we have to really get at the causes of demand, as well as have effective foreign policy and domestic policy.
Briefly, Congressman Rangel, there's some thought about putting U.S. warships off Colombia. Do you think that's a good idea?
Only if we have the cooperation and support of Colombia, the Organization of American States. You bet your life we have to use our resources to fight these drug lords that really have more than most people have, most countries have at their ability to fight this war. But again, Jack Lawn has 2,800 agents, and we have more Capitol policemen protecting us on Capitol Hill than he has fighting this war around the world.
Congressman Rangel in Hong Kong, where it's early in the morning, thank you very much. Jack Lawn here at the DEA, thank you as well. One theme, of course, of the Camarena case was the growing suspicion that at the time there was a web of corruption that spanned all the way from Mexican state police at local levels to the very highest levels of the Mexican government, frustrating the DEA efforts to find the real killers. Mexican authorities then and now continue to deny any kind of a cover-up, saying that the mini-series overshadows significant progress that has been made against trafficking in that country. Well, that's a subject that we'll get into tomorrow evening when we return after part 2 of the drug wars. I'll see you tomorrow night on NBC Nightly News. Until then, I'm Tom Brokaw, NBC News. Good night.
Tonight, are Mexican authorities giving American drug agents a fair shot at getting to drug lords south of the border? Tom Brokaw anchors an NBC News special report following the movie.
I'm Brian Gumble.
I'm Deborah Norval.
Tomorrow morning on Today, we'll check out violence on college campuses.
We'll also meet a man who uses tough methods to teach tough kids.
Tomorrow morning on Today.
One sure way to shake your blues, put yourself in someone else's shoes. It could take less time to clean your room or do homework. Well, I bet you never, ever, never knew that such a really cool thing to do could be so simple and so quick. That's it. You can nominate yourself to be the most popular guy you'll ever see. It's much easier than multiplying fractions.
See you later, Dad. Thanks for signing my shoes.
Shoes?
That's it. Do something nice for someone else, big. That's it.
Hey, thanks.
They kind of needed it.
You're all right.
Have fun.
Doing something nice is doing something right. From the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints.
From Washington, D.C., NBC News presents Drug Wars Tonight. Here is Tom Brokaw.
Good evening. We're back again with another update on the war on drugs following part 2 of the NBC movie on the 1985 kidnap and murder of drug enforcement agent Kiki Camarena. Corruption, of course, is a major factor in the drug trade wherever it is practiced. The money from drugs so overwhelming, so enormous, that more and more allegations are surfacing all the time. In this country, 4 cases about to go to trial involve 7 DEA agents. After the Camarena killing, there were charges of suspected corruption among high-ranking Mexican police and government officials. Washington, however, now credits the current administration of President Salinas of Mexico with stepping up the war on drugs. However, some say that he seems unwilling to go all the way when it comes to exposing corruption. Mexican officials were told that they couldn't legally participate in this program. But we do have with us tonight Dr. Guido Belsasso, who is with the Institute of the Americas at the University of California in San Diego. He's been active in drug rehabilitation programs in Mexico, and he's worked with the World Health Organization for the past 20 years in the field of shutting down drug trafficking. Dr. Belsasso, let me ask you, first of all, if you believe that there has been progress in Mexico, why has there been such an enormous increase in the amount of illegal drugs coming from Mexico into this country?
Well, first of all, Tom, I think that the important issue is that as the market for the consumption of drugs in the United States has increased, so has been the production and the trafficking of it. I think that one of the most important issues in this whole war against drugs is the appetite for drugs that the American people have, and how this, in turn, creates the demand that is supplied by the countries in the Latin America, basically, and the Asian basin countries for the United States.
Well, that's a fair point, Dr. Belsasso, but let's talk about Mexico, if we can, for a moment. Are you willing tonight to vouch, for example, for the ethics of the Mexican military, because a lot of federal prosecutors in Southern California are saying that that's now the area that must be broken?
I think that the most important thing is what has happened during the last 13 months of the Salinas administration. He has vowed from the very beginning of his administration to fight corruption. And we all know, as you said at the beginning of the program, that when such vast amounts of monies are involved, the corruption touches everything that it gets to. And I think it's important to realize that corruption is not only prevalent in Mexico amongst one specific group, but it's something that is done all over in the United States, in Mexico, in Latin America, and the South Asian basin.
But if we can, just to continue on Mexico for a moment, most recently in Southern California, a high-ranking Mexican businessman who was a brother-in-law of a former president of that country was indicted. The case against him seems to be very strong. Is there any doubt in your mind that during the time that Kiki Camarena was kidnapped and killed, that the corruption went all the way to the top in your country?
Well, I think the important issue is that the people who are depicted in Ms. Shannon's book and in the movie have all been brought to trial and have been convicted. Rafael Caro got 133 years in jail. Ernesto Fonseca, 144. Commander Espino Verdin, 40 years, and just recently, just to contradict what you said about Mexico's and President Salinas' unwillingness to go all the way, Miguel Ángel Félix Gallardo, the most notorious Mexican trafficker, is now in jail and is being judged. All, including the director of the Mexican CIA, who has been put in jail also during this administration.
All right, we'll ask you to just stay with us for a moment if we can, Dr. Belsasso, because we want to introduce two other guests with us tonight. James Garule was the chief federal prosecutor in the Los Angeles trial, which convicted 3 men in the Camarena kidnap murder. He is now a professor of law at Notre Dame University, but he still serves as a special assistant to the Justice Department on one case. Also here, Elaine Shannon. The movie is based on her 1988 book, Desperados, an investigative account of the Camarena murder. Professor, let me ask you, are you confident that they're doing all that they can in Mexico now to do something about the drug trade?
No, I'm not, and a perfect example of that would be relative to Carl Quintero, who was indicted by a federal grand jury in Los Angeles. As you know, he's been in custody with the Mexican authorities since April of 1985, and up until most recently, he was housed in a jail in Mexico City. The section of the jail would normally house over 100 inmates, and he occupied that area by himself. He was allowed to have a TV, VCR, jacuzzi. He was basically treated like a king while he was in prison. He had access to alcohol, access to drugs, and for the Mexican government to say they're doing all that they can while they're treating this individual in this particular manner, I think makes a mockery of justice as relates to this case.
But they have, in fact, disassembled his luxurious living, and they have moved him to other quarters now, so far as we know.
And that's interesting. That just happened recently, as of last month, and it may be coincidental that it happened shortly before the airing of this particular miniseries.
Ms. Shannon, there are still suspects in the Camarena case who are at large as well, right?
Oh, well, sure. As far as the U.S. is concerned, people haven't been brought to justice in this case. Caro Quintero and Fonseca, the traffickers, may have been sentenced in Mexico, but there are other high officials who were high in the interior ministries, in the secret police, the so-called CIA, the federales, and the army who are suspected in the Camarena case and in other trafficking cases. They are the subjects of a grand jury in Los Angeles now, and some of them could be indicted. These people haven't been charged. Some of them left their jobs in Mexico, but they haven't been charged in Mexico.
Subtitle of your book, in effect, is that we're not winning the war on drugs, and we cannot win the war on drugs. Is that your judgment, really?
I think we can if we treat it like a war. We can't invade every country where there's a lot of corruption and a lot of transshipping of drugs. It's not a war. It's a social problem, and we've got to deal with it, and these other countries have to deal with it, too, and just blaming each other is not going to do anything.
Yeah, but it's a fair point, isn't it, when Mexicans and others say, hey, listen, we only ship drugs to your country because there's an enormous market for drugs in America.
Absolutely, and I don't blame them for saying that. What I resent is when the U.S. government says to me as a reporter, Mexico is our closest ally in the war on drugs. They have a model program. They're doing great, when in fact, the truth was, as I wrote in the book, they were doing very little. An American agent was killed, and they still did very little.
Let me ask you about the rule of law in all of this. The DEA, understandably, has to make all kinds of deals with unsavory characters, break the rules when they're in other countries. We have to crash through the middle of the night and invade some countries in some instances. Does it become, in the war on drugs, something that is above the law or beneath the law, in your judgment? So it's very hard to find where there is justice here?
No, I don't think so. I think that the relative to the Kiki Camarena case, I think that the DEA agents have abided by the Constitution, have followed the laws of the Constitution. The defendants in the case that I prosecuted certainly received a fair trial. They received due process of law, and I think all of their rights were preserved under our Constitution.
And what about those so-called recreation or casual users of drugs? When they see something like the Kiki Camarena case brought back to light again, when they realize the torture for that man and for his family and for other law enforcement agents, based on your long experience as a prosecutor, do you think it will have any impact on use in this country?
I think so, and I certainly hope so. I hope that the casual user looks at this and it impacts that particular individual, thinking that, in fact, this happened because of the habit that that individual has in this country, and but for that habit, this type of action would not have taken place. The demand would not be there. The money, the profit motive would not be there as well.
And let me ask you finally, Dr. Belsasso, about Mexico and the future. You say that it's doing all that it can, but you've heard here tonight contrary opinions to that. What more can we expect from President Salinas in the future?
President Salinas is very committed to the fight on drugs. This year, more than 40 Mexican national policemen have been killed. People like Camarena were killed in Mexico, 40 of them. Mexico has stopped over 34 tons of cocaine in the past year. This is more than half of all of that was seized in the last 10 years. More than 10,000 people have been brought to trial just this past administration. And President Salinas is definitely committed to improving the situation and combating the traffic situation as part of a national security issue, as a plan to protect the Mexican youth, and as part of the collaboration of Mexico in the international arena. I'm quite confident that we are in the process of doing that, and especially because of the very close collaboration between President Salinas and President Bush.
Yes.
They see very much eye to eye on this issue.
Thank you very much, Dr. Belsasso, for being with us tonight. We'll be back tomorrow night with still another update on the drug wars. I'm Tom Brokaw. See you tomorrow night on NBC Nightly News.
See details at participating stores.
From Washington, D.C., NBC News presents Drug Wars Tonight. Here is Tom Brokaw.
Good evening. Once again, from the Drug Enforcement Administration Laboratory in Washington, D.C., this is one of 8 crime labs across the country where confiscated drugs are identified and processed as evidence in drug cases. Now, this is not normally the kind of evidence that DEA agents pick up in their raids, but we thought you'd like to see it. It's a .45 automatic pistol that was owned by Rafael Carol Quintero. Actually, it's one half of a match set. This pistol is gold and silver-plated. It contains more than 1,000 diamonds in the handle. It's worth between $90,000 and $100,000, and it comes complete with a clip of silver bullets. As we have been discussing in each of these programs, wherever the drug trade occurs, it does appear that corruption is deep and pervasive. That includes Mexico and other countries. One of the scenes in tonight's movie, of course, showed the Mexico prison, where some of the convicted drug bosses were doing time. Here are the actual scenes now, shot by Mexican television last July, the cells occupied by Carol Quintero and others. As you can see, it was more like a luxury apartment than a jail cell. Quintero and the other drug lords were given suites complete with TVs, VCRs. They had fireplaces, private bedrooms where they were visited by their girlfriends with king-size beds, closets filled with cowboy hats, expensive shirts, boots, designer suits, a kitchen stocked with food and champagne. Later, Quintero said that someone blew the whistle on his jailhouse lifestyle because he simply had not paid the right bribe. 8 times since 1973, American presidents have declared a war on drugs, and there has been a welter of federal narcotics control efforts. But the question remains, can we win this war? Is it a war against an enemy that we still don't fully understand? Are the American people part of the enemy? A question we put now to our special guest tonight, William Bennett, Bush administration's drug czar. Mr. Bennett, what about the Mexicans? Are they doing a better job these days, in your judgment, in terms of controlling corruption?
I was in El Paso January 4th. I asked our guys there at the border, I said, there's no press here. Tell me, are they doing better in Mexico? They said, yes, they're doing better. I think they're doing better. We need to keep the pressure on, but they're doing better.
But they had a long way to go.
They had a long way to go, and lots of people still have a long way to go.
But in your judgment, are they being vigorous enough in tracking down the suspects that remain at large in the Camarena case?
Jack Lawn, who's in some ways the hero of this piece, rightly so, tells me that those other people are being brought to justice. But, you know, I wouldn't want to put too much in saying, well, every bit of corruption has to be rooted out in every foreign nation. That'd be fine if that happened. What has to happen is America has to get serious in the way we've gotten serious recently. Panama, helping Mr. Barco in Colombia, backing up these guys so they're not fighting this war alone.
In the Kiki Camarena case, if President Bush were in office now, do you think he would have sent American troops into Mexico if the conditions were the same now as they were in Panama, for example?
Well, I think the Panama situation is relatively unique, but what you're not going to see anymore is these guys out there by themselves without backing. If you look at the critics, what they're saying now is they're saying we're being too active. We're too ready to use the military. We're too ready to use the might of the United States. I think we need to use that force because we haven't for a lot of years.
But half of the drugs now coming into this country, according to most estimates, although Jack Lawn says maybe 40%, right, are coming through Mexico.
That's right. Still a hell of a problem there. And one of the reasons is that we've had some luck on the southeastern border. Putting pressure on in Florida has driven more of the drugs overland. We're a long way from winning, but I think we're starting to take the kind of serious action that we should have taken a long time ago.
What about the casual user, so-called, in all of this? The suburbanite or the college kid or the young businessman or young businesswoman who's using drugs? What about their place?
Every user of cocaine is not only killing himself, he's killing people like Kiki Camarena, and he's buying that gun that you just showed us. He paid for that gun. That's what the casual, so-called casual cocaine user does.
Thanks, Mr. Bennett. However you feel about the war on drugs, whether we're winning or losing, whether the tactics are appropriate, what place the drug user has in that war, however you feel about all of these questions, it is worth reflecting tonight on the life and times of Kiki Camarena, especially since other DEA agents who have followed his trail are on the front lines tonight in this war, many of them working at this hour in exceptionally dangerous situations on our behalf. I'm Tom Brokaw, NBC News in Washington. I'll see you tomorrow night on NBC Nightly News.